And a very good evening to you, and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. A little late start. There was some traffic as I was rushing from class to get our program started. These things do happen. I apologize to you who we have kept waiting. Well, it's been quite a weekend of news. Um, uh, Lots happening on the political front. Of course, the race for leader of the PNC has really gotten going with the entry of Mr. Joe Harmon in the race. As you know, Aubrey Norton and Richard Van West Charles had already announced their candidacies, and one was waiting on the others. Well, Mr. Harmon has entered the race. He launched his campaign, as you remember, last Thursday, as Mr. Dr. Van West Charles was doing his town hall meeting here in Politics 101. And of course, with the entry of Mr. Harmon, the speculation about whether former President Granger would run, that has been laid to rest, since it is not conceivable that Mr. Granger would run against Mr. Harmon. Mr. Harmon, of course, is seen as an ally of Mr. Granger. And of course, the excuse me, the speculation as to whether um, party chairman Walter Lawrence would run, that also seems to have been laid to rest. There is a story in the Stabrook News today in which our close ally, James Bond, said that she would not be running. And James Bond, as you know, has been very close to Mrs. Lawrence, and he confirmed that she would not be running. So it seems as though, for now, the race is a three-way race among Harmon, Norton, and Richard Van West Charles. Of course, everybody's following that race and um, waiting for the Congress to happen. Mr. Granger weighed in this weekend and said that he thinks the Congress should be pushed back, and he gave his reasons why. He also um, uh, named some members of the executive committee. I think Van West Charles, Norton, Mortimer Mingo, and I can't remember. Oh, yes, Winston Felix, as holding meetings and so forth. And I just saw a report in Demerara Waves where these gentlemen have responded to Granger. So a lot has been happening over the last couple of days, and of course you can follow that race. The Village Voice has been given a lot of coverage. In fact, the Village Voice was the only paper this weekend that carried Mr. Granger's position that the Congress should be postponed. So a lot is happening there. And I know that you all will be following that race. I also would be following that race. The PNC is one of two large parties, and what happens in the PNC affects what happens in the rest of the country. Whoever becomes leader of the PNC potentially is a leader of the country. And so therefore, we have to pay a lot of interest there. So again, welcome everyone to today's edition, whether you're in Guyana, the wider Caribbean, or further afield in North America, in Europe, in Africa, Welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. Another story that caught my attention was we had two professors from the University of the West Indies questioned the integrity or impartiality of the Supreme Court. They're arguing that the Supreme Court, which from their standpoint had to be corrected by the CCJ, that the Supreme Court may not have been impartial. That is, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the coalition and had to be overturned. Those rulings had to be overturned by the CCJ. And so the two goodly professors are saying that the Court of Appeal may not have been impartial. Where a couple of things jump out. One of those professors, Cynthia Barrow Giles, was part of the CARICOM team that came here to oversee, or to not oversee, but observe the recount. And many of you, if not all of you, would remember that the CARICOM report in that recount was quite controversial. On the one hand, the report said that GCOM is not in a position to oversee free and fair elections, yet the same report argued that the PPP won the election. Contradiction. GCOM can't oversee a free and fair election, yet you certify the election for the PPP. Contradiction. The other thing is that the observer team only observed a small percentage, less than 20% of the boxes, and so made a determination based on observation of just a few boxes. But here is one of the members of that recount team now is arguing that our appeal court may not be an impartial court. No, here is it. Here's the story. The High Court, presided over by Chief Justice Wilshire, that court was overruled by the appeal court. The assumption of the professors is that the High Court, which ruled mostly in favor of the PPP, is cool, is good. The appeal court, which ruled mostly in favor of the coalition, is bad, is not impartial. So clearly the two professors are taking sides, right? They're not admonishing the High Court, which ruled mostly in favor of the PPP. They're admonishing the court that ruled mostly in favor of the coalition. So their own bias has been exposed. Their own bias has been exposed. Tomorrow night, we're going to deal more with that. I'm having Kemal Gramjatan and Royce Dilford, who are going to come on to deal with that attack on our appeal court. Mr. Royce Dilford had put out a statement last week saying that the PPP is weaponizing the courts. So we're going to have the lawyers who are going to sift through that. But I am raising the question here. Are the courts of Guyana under attack? We know our constitution said that our appeal court should be the court of last resort when it came to electoral matters. Yet the CCJ took jurisdiction, in a sense overruled our constitution and argued that as our court of last resort, they had the last say on election, not our appeal court. And of course, some of us took a hard line against that because neither the Guyana Constitution or the CCJ's compact, the rules that govern the CCJ, gave the CCJ the authority to take jurisdiction on election matters. Yet it did so and overruled our appeal court. Now we have two professors from the University of the West Indies basically saying that our appeal court is compromised. Our high court is not compromised. Our appeal court is compromised. Why? Because it ruled mostly in favor of one contestant in the election. The other court ruled in favor of the other contestant, but that court is fine. For me, that is an attack on the integrity of our appeal court. And I think it needs some examination, if not pushback. Tomorrow night, we're going to expand on that. I want to talk tonight about a different subject, and that is the subject that has arisen out of the PNC's race. At the launch of Mr. Harmon's campaign on Thursday, Attorney Roysdale Ford, who is supporting Mr. Harmon, raised the question of whether, in fact, if one of the contestants were to win, he would turn the PNC into an African-based party. And he was, of course, referring to Mr. Norton without calling his name. Mr. Norton responded, and there has been that debate ever since. One, G.H.K. Lal weighed in and said he agreed with Mr. Roysdale Ford. Well, I want to examine that question because it is a question that is very important. I know a lot of people have come down on Roysdale Ford. Many who are supporting Aubrey Norton have taken the position that Mr. Roysdale Ford is out of order. Now, I don't want to deal with that. But I want to examine the larger question of race and party politics. Race and party politics. It is not the first time that the question of the two large parties and their attitude to the question of race. Now, I suspect that the position against Norton has to do with the fact that Norton has acknowledged that the PPP is attacking African Guyanese, that they have a racist agenda since they've come back to power last year. And he has pushed back against it. I don't know that Mr. Norton is a bleeding heart Black nationalist. I've known him for a long time, and he is not a person who speaks often on race. We know the people in Guyana who take on the race question. Certainly the people of this generation. You know, persons like Eric Phillips, Lincoln Lewis, Vincent Alexander, myself, among others, have been the people who have frontally taken on the race question. Bobby Norton doesn't. In fairness to him, he doesn't. All he did is to acknowledge that African Guyanese are under attack. But that is enough for you to be branded a black racist. And I suppose in the context of electoral politics, that is something that his opponents are prepared to use against him. Now, what bothers me about this issue is that these two parties are supported in the main by the two major ethnic groups. Over 90% of the votes for the PNC comes from African Guyanese. The same thing for the PPP. Over 90% of their votes come from Indo-Guyanese. The majority, 90% may be too much because when you consider the Amerindian vote, it may, but thereabout. The majority of their votes come from these two ethnic groups. And so the question, are these parties ethnic parties? And the answer has to be yes. They are ethnic parties. But they are ethnic parties which have to govern the country. And so they're also national parties. They're national parties with ethnic support bases. There's no contradiction between your party getting the majority of its votes from one ethnic group, and that does not make you a national party. Yes, you are a national party. You're a national party with an Afro-Guyanese base, and the PPP is a national party with an Indian Guyanese base. The question for me is not whether the parties are black parties or Indian parties. The question for me is when they get into government, whether they govern fairly. That is the question. Not whether you're a black party or an Indian party. You're, of course, a black party. Black people are the people that support you. If black people were to remove their votes from the PNC will become a minor party. And if Indian people were to take away their votes from the PPP will become a minor party. So I think for those parties to say, for the PPP to say I'm not an Indian party, or for the PNC to say I'm not a black party, in a sense is a kind of, I'm going to be mild. I was about to say disrespect for your support base. But you are really saying that the people who vote for you are inconsequential. You're not recognizing them for the vote that they give to you. Now, in a multi-ethnic society, as I said, you have to balance the fact that you are a party that is supported in the main by one ethnic group, and the fact that when you get into government, you have to govern for all groups. You have to balance those two things. And I think the problem for both the PPP and the PNC is their inability to balance it, certainly in their rhetoric. The PPP, I think, gets off the hook, partly because the PPP will tell you, we're not an Indian party. Well, Jack Dio, a few years ago, said, yes, they were an Indian party. But for the most part, they would say they're not an Indian party. But when they get into government, they operate like an Indian party. And so their base doesn't suffer from the fact that they say they are not an Indian party. The PPP used to say they're a communist party, but it was the only communist party in the world that mobilized based on race and governed based on race. So nothing is wrong in saying you're communist. Nothing is wrong in saying that you are a national party. The question is, how do you govern when given power? And when given power, the PPP governs as an Indian party. We are seeing that right now. Their policies, their economic policies, favor the Indian elite, the Indian merchant class. And we have seen recently that they're now using cash grants as policies to steer economic resources to the Indian working class. So they govern as an Indian party. Let's come to the PNC. The PNC usually say they're not a black party. And then when they got power in 2015, they didn't govern as a black party. And that may have been one of the reasons that they didn't do as well as they should have done at the election, because there was low turnout, lower than expected turnout in a lot of the black communities. I would estimate close to 15 to 20% of Africans stay away from the poll because they didn't feel that the coalition government did enough for African Guyanese. So the dilemma for the PNC is, how do you govern? On the one hand, you say you're not a black party, and then when you govern, you tend to take that attitude into your governance. A lot of resources were given to the Amerindians. A lot of resources were given to sugar. Billions of dollars were given to the sugar by the coalition. So Indians cannot say that the PNC policy, while in government, did not take them into consideration. I would say the coalition government bent over backwards to appease the other ethnic groups, appease the East Indian sugar workers mainly, and the Amerindians. And they got less than 5% Indian vote, and they got about 40% of the Amerindian vote. And the African vote, those who voted, they got 90%. So you see the dilemma. You depend on an ethnic group for your votes. When you govern, because you don't want to be accused of being racist, you give more resources to the other ethnic group and play down your ethnic group. And it's a dilemma. It's a dilemma. If we were to follow what people want the PNC or black parties to do, which is not to talk about race. So the PNC will not be able to talk about race. Black people would be hammered as they're being hammered now, and the PNC would not be able to talk about it, raise it, defend black people, because they would be accused by Indians of being racist, and that their leaders would be afraid that if they did that, then they wouldn't get crossover votes. So at the end of the day, black people are being thrown under the bus because their party, for fear of being called a black man party, will not defend them, will not speak loudly about their suffering, and when they get into government, will not try to level the playing field and to engage in policies that will help to bring blacks up to the level of the other ethnic groups. The fact of the matter is that the problem is more for blacks than for Indians. Blacks are behind economically. Black people own less than 10% of the wealth in Guyana. Most of the wealth in Guyana is owned by Indians and Portuguese. Black people own less than 10% of the wealth. When it comes to all the other issues, unemployment, poverty, there is poverty, there is unemployment in all ethnic groups. But it tends to affect African Guyanese more. When it comes to being victims of extrajudicial killings, African Guyanese are affected more than the other ethnic groups. And so therefore, the inequalities in the society means that African Guyanese are victims economically, politically, than the other ethnic groups. And their leaders have to be afraid to talk about it because the party would then be called the Black Man Party, and their leaders will be called the racists. That's the position the PNC is in. They have to choose between speaking up for their own supporters and, on the other hand, trying to appease the other ethnic groups. And of course, I mean, the PNC is not going to be able to win an election on its own. African Guyanese, I don't know, people say that East Indians are now a minority. But if East Indians are a minority, they still represent a larger share of the electorate than Africans. And so the PNC is caught between a rock and a hard place. If they are to win elections, they have to have crossover votes from Amerindians and a small section of the East Indian population. For the PNC to win straight out by themselves, they will have to have, first of all, a turnout among blacks in excess of 85%. That's the first thing. They'll have to have a turnout of 85% among blacks. And then they will have to maintain 90% of that turnout. And along with the Amerindian vote, they probably could win an election on their own. The problem is that to get 85% of blacks to turn out to the polls, you have to advocate for them. You have to advocate for them. You have to feel their pain. You have to talk about their pain And you have to call a spade, and you have to tell them you love them. I don't see how we can get 85% turnout among Blacks if we don't tell them we love them, if we don't take up their issues, if we don't talk about them being discriminated against, if we don't talk about the racism against them. Because at the end of the day, people are moved by leaderships that are able to identify with their problems, with their suffering, and also with their joys. And since Burnham went off the scene, the PNC has struggled to identify with the pains and the sufferings of African Guyanese. And so the turnout at elections among African Guyanese has been in the 70s generally. A good 25% of Black people have not turned out to the polls in elections since Burnham. And that's a problem. What it means is that the electoral party is not really getting into the minds of their support base. And so the less African Guyanese turnout you have, the more you have to depend on a small percentage of Indian vote and a bigger percentage of the Amerindian vote. The PPP has worked out how to win elections by first of all getting the turnout in large numbers, and then winning 90-something% of that vote, and then winning 60% of the Amerindian vote. It is their Southern strategy. I use the term Southern strategy because in the United States, that was the strategy that was developed in the late 60s by the Republican Party in America. And that is why they continued to win presidential elections for a long time. That is to whip up high turnout among whites and then win the overwhelming majority of the Southern white vote. Split the Northern white vote, that is, win 40% of the Northern white vote, 80-90% of the Southern white vote. And that's how the Republicans have been able to win presidential elections. They didn't need the Black vote, they didn't need the Hispanic vote. That was a simple strategy. It was called the Southern strategy. The Democratic Party in America, since LBJ in 1964, he was the last president to win, the last Democratic candidate to win a majority of the white vote. Ever since then, the Democrats have gotten 50% of the white vote. And it was not until Obama came along that they figured out that if you get a high turnout among Blacks, and then you win 90% of the Black vote, 70% of the Hispanic vote, and with the 40% of white vote, you can win an election. The key for the Democrats was to get high turnout among Blacks. They were always going to win 90% of Black vote. But the higher the turnout, it was better. And so Obama Obama was able to use that and win twice. And when Hillary Clinton came along, she played down the black vote. She didn't appeal to blacks. She didn't appeal to their suffering. She went after the so-called blue-collar white votes, and black people didn't come out for her. She lost. Biden was able to win because he avoided the mistake Hillary made. Carry up the black turnout, win the majority of the black vote, win 70% of the Hispanic vote, and then the 40% of the white vote, and you're able to win an election. So in Guyana, the PPP figured out increase Indian turnout, then win 90% of the Indian vote. And then you win 60% of the Amerindian vote, and you don't need black votes. And the way the PPP has been able to do that is to, when it gets in office, do what it's doing now. Give a lot of resources to rice farmers, give a lot of resources to sugar workers. And so you hold the Indian working class vote. Which Indian working class person at the next election is going to say, I'm not voting for the PPP, after what the PPP is doing for them now? They're going to vote PPP. The PNC chances of getting Indian working class vote at the next election has become slimmer and slimmer. Because once the PPP gets into office, it governs as an Indian party. And it's learned from its mistake. You see, in 2011 and 2015, a small percentage of Indians came over to the coalition. And there were a couple of factors. One was the Jack Dio factor. Jack Dio, the Indians didn't move from the PPP because they felt the PPP was racist. No, they didn't have a problem with the PPP on that score. That small percentage, maybe about 5% of the Indian votes, came over because of Nagamutu. Nagamutu had some following in the Indian community, and some of them came over to the coalition with him. Those were Nagamutu voters. They weren't PNC voters. They were Nagamutu voters. And insofar as that there was a conflict between Nagamutu and Jack Dio, they chose Nagamutu over Jack Dio. Jack Dio had taken the PPP too far into the criminal enterprise. Jack Dio was embracing more the Indian elites, the Indian money people. And he was taking the Indian working class for granted. So some of that Indian working class in Bart settlement, on the quarantine, they went with Nagamutu. And so in 2011, and to some extent in 2015, that small percentage of Indians came over and perhaps helped us clinch the election. Because we won by 4,000 votes in 2015. And so if 4,000 Indians came over, that became pivotal. They soon left and went back because the PPP recognized the reason. So what the PPP did, they maligned Nagamutu, Kolya, and Makaran, and that's the worst curse you can get in that community. And then they said Nagamutu joined those black man them, and look what the black man them do to you. They appealed to the Indian conscience. They work on the fears of the Indian people. And so in 2020, that small percentage of Indians went back. The section that didn't go back, they went to those 10 small parties and now and so on. So most of them went back to the PPP, but then what the PPP and the external forces did is that they set up those 9, 10 parties. And so those Indians who were still not satisfied that Jack Dew and them had cleaned up their act, they voted for those small parties. Small parties in the end get a seat. And so therefore, we are now left in a situation where the PNC is going to find it very difficult to get Indian votes at the next election. The PNC will have to strategize now as to how to win. The strategy that got us to over the tape in 2011, 2015. Whereas you went into a coalition and the AFC was able to bring on board that minority Nagamutu vote. And you had the WPA there, so there are these radical Black people who, there was always that section of radical Black people who never liked the PNC, and always when the WPA came, they went to the WPA. When the WPA faded and the AFC came with Raphael Trotman, they went to Raphael Trotman. They're always that radical group in the Black community that wouldn't willingly vote for the PNC. And Corbyn figured that out, because at the 2006 election, the PNC got its lowest vote ever, 34%. It usually would get about 42%. And in 2006, it went down to 34, and that's when Corbyn made his move. He went to the WPA and said the first line of action is to get back that 42%. That 8% had gone to the AFC, because the AFC had said, when you're in opposition and you say, I am not a race-based party, then the dissidents from the two race-based parties will come to you, because they will see it as safe territory. It happened with the WPA. When the WPA came on the scene, those radical Black people followed Guyana. They were Ascray people. The first WPA mass base was Ascray people. The radical Black nationalists, they came to the WPA with Guyana. Guyana brought them. And then Indians, dissidents came over. But in 1992, when election came, and the stakes became high, it's either an Indian government or a Black government. The Indians from the WPA went back to the PPP. And then the Black people looked and saw that. And they said, well, we go in PNC. And that was the end of it for the WPA. A lot of people said the WPA declined when Rodney died. That's not true. The WPA declined after the 92 election. And then what happened after 92, as the PNC lost in 97, they lost in 2001. By 2006, Raphael Trotman comes onto the scene with Kemal Ramjatan, and they formed the AFC with Raphael Trotman as the leader. And those Black people who went back to the people in the PNC in 1992, they then went to Trotman. Because they're never comfortable with the PNC. The radicals, the diehard Black people. Because the PNC always plays it safe, as they're doing now. I'm not a Black man party. And if you're a diehard Black nationalist, you say, nah, I ain't doing that. And so you're always looking for another party. And so in 2006, they went with Trotman to the AFC, and Corbyn said, mm-mm. And he went to the WPA and he said, together we got to come together. And he, Rupert Rupnarain and Clive Thomas worked out the strategy. And in 2011, the coalition won 43% of the vote. Took it back where the PNC usually were. And for 2015, the AFC came on board. And so with the PNC getting the bulk of the black vote, the WPA bringing those Hardays, radicals, middle classish, school teacherish type, and the AFC bringing the Nagamutu vote. We won in 2015. Those Indians from the AFC they've gone back to the PPP. No, they've gone back to the PPP. Can the PNC bring them back? They're not going to trust the AFC anymore because they're going to say, we give the AFC the vote, the AFC go in the coalition and allow the PNC to take advantage from them. At least the PPP is telling them that. So if there are dissident Indians, will they come back to a PNC? The PNC will figure, okay, if we say that we are looking after black issues, then propose smoke with pipe, we can't get no Indian vote. And that's a fair thing to say. The question is how far you go to get a potential Indian vote. How far you move away from your base. If you say that, the PNC is not a black party, and black people are taking blows now from the PPP, plenty blows, and they know they're taking blows because they're black, and they hear you say that, they're going to say, oh my goodness, my party is throwing me under the bus. You probably will get away with that language in another year, but not now. Even if you feel that now is not the time to say that you're a black party. It's a little bit harsh to tell black people who are suffering and they're looking to you to save them, to defend them, and to hear the party saying they're not a black party, and if one leader gets through, he gonna think. I don't think it's the right language. I don't think it's strategic. I don't want to get into PNC business. But if I'm giving you I don't think it's the right thing to say. The Indians would like it. The Indian party would like you saying that. Because the Indian party is going to spend the next 4 years making sure that Indian Guyanese are happy and that no other party will come and take them away from them. That's what you're up against. And so I think strategically, it's difficult. It's not impossible, but it's difficult. I don't see something has to happen between now and the next 4 years for 5% of Indians to come over to our side, come over to the PNC side or the coalition side or the APNU side. And so the PNC has to figure out, the PNC leader, I think, has to figure out how much you move away from black in order to get some Indians. And I think to say that if one of your leaders become the leader, he will turn it into a black party. I think that's a big leap you're making there, because you're going to alienate a lot of black people. You're going to say, look, my party, it can't even acknowledge me. You know, you get a girlfriend and you don't text she anywhere, she asks you, man, like you shameful walk with me. Or you get a boyfriend, you know, and you don't take a certain place. He said, girl, like you shameful walk with me. And I don't think the PNC wants to put themselves in a position where they're ashamed to call their own people by their name, black people. That's the challenge. You want to balance it. I understand why the PNC can't talk about blackness in an aggressive way, because you're trying to get votes from the other side. I get that. I get that. But to say like openly and we are not a black party, I think it's extra, especially. I mean, it's unfair to Aubrey. I mean, I don't think Aubrey's a bleeding heart. You can add that me. I just wear me the shiki, not just on emancipation, that the spirit every day and get on none tonight. And I don't tolerate nobody taking advantage from black people. I open my big mouth. And I just talk about slavery. And I just talk about racism. People like myself have made that choice. I didn't come into politics as a black nationalist. I came into politics as a multiracial person in the WPA. That's how I got into politics. But I learned that you can be multiracial. That doesn't mean that you're not black. That was our politics. That's the politics of Walter Rodney. That's the politics of UC Guyana. The PPP behaves as though Walter Rodney wasn't black. When Walter Rodney came to Guyana, he didn't have to deal with black power. Guyana and them had fought black power and long. So when he came, he didn't have to fight the black power thing. He fought the black power thing in Jamaica. That's why he was expelled. He was expelled from Jamaica for black power. But by the time he came back to Guyana in 74, Guyana and Askre, Ogunsi and them, they had already dealt with black power. So Walter could come and talk about multiracialism. The PPP behaved today as though Walter wasn't black, because he's dead and gone. He can't talk for himself. But I think Walter Rodney would have been so insulted if he were alive to hear how the PPP dress him up as though he don't have a black bone in him. This man is the theoretician of Caribbean black power. And the PPP behaves as though he wasn't black, and that the rest of us are racist because we talk about blackness and so on. You know, God bless them. For they know not what they do. The fact of the matter is that some of us have made that decision. I've made that decision. I don't care if they call me a black racist. I know what my politics are. I know that I will not tolerate black wrong. We black men and women, Guyana, Rodney, Andaye, Ogunsi, Hinds, and all of us black people, we fought against the black government because we felt it was wrong. Yes, we are black power, but we are not for black wrong. When the coalition came to power, I supported the coalition. My party was part of the coalition. But whenever the coalition did wrong things, I said they were wrong. Because that's my black power. My black power is a black power against black wrong. It's a black power against wrong things being done to black people. It's a black power about black dignity. So if people want to call me a racist because I said I love who I am, I love how I look, I love my color, I won't go back to God and say, God, bring me back another color. God make me in this color, and I am proud of it, and I will carry it wherever I go. And if you don't want to acknowledge it, I'll put it in your face. And if you want to take advantage of it, I am going to stand up to you and fight you. So people like myself and Lincoln and Eric and Vincent and so have decided that we are going to be the ones who are going to stand up. I don't want to say that I ain't got nothing against Indian people. I don't want to say it to sound as though some of them I'm you know curry favoring and so on. The fact of the matter is that I love Indian people. I love people of other races, but I love my race first. I love my race first. And because of my love for my race, it allows me to love other races. And I am not going to whisper when people taking advantage of my race. I'm going to be loud about it, even if I'm called a racist. And all Black leaders who have stood up and defended Black people have been called racist. Go right back. UC Guyana is about the most non-racist person I have ever met. In the 1940s, UC Guyana joined the Indian National Congress. He was a Black man and he was a member of that organization. This was an organization that was helping to advocate for Indian independence. I've never heard a racist word come out of that man's mouth. Yet, he's called Guyana's biggest racist. Why? Because when Black people came under attack in 1961 and 1964, he came out and defended them. He went in front of the government office and went on a hunger strike to draw attention because he was trying to get the governor and the British and them to do something about Black people who were being attacked and killed in 64 and 61, because in 62 and 63, the aggressors were Black people in the cities. But in 64, the aggressors were on the Indian side when Jagan came back from the conference, Independence Conference, where he allowed the British to impose PR, proportional representation. And he came back, told his supporters that they're imposing PR to throw him out of office and that they should stand up. And they did. And so they became the aggressors, and Guyana stood up and defended Black people. The fellows all the guys would tell you in Buxton, when they wanted to go over to the Indian villages and wreak havoc, Guyana would turn them back. And then, of course, he later changed his name and he founded Askria. Askria was not about Black supremacy. It was about Black dignity. And yet, Guyana is called the biggest racist. So people like myself have decided that you don't have to hate another group to be called a racist in Guyana. All you have to do is to say, I love Black people, and you're a racist. And so what that does is that it makes people in the PNC very afraid to stand up for Blackness. Very afraid. You listen to PNC leaders, and they all would hedge on the question of race. Amanza Desir got into problems because she's a young political person, and she dared to take on the race question. And you saw what those Indian people wanted to do to her. And of course, the PNC didn't come out and defend her. She had to be defended by people like myself and Vincent and others. The party has not worked out how to balance its commitment to its Black constituency and its commitment to its national image. Doesn't work out. Perhaps it's impossible to do so because the Indian elites will never allow you to do so. Look, I know Ravi Dev well. I will call him a friend. But I saw Ravi Dev the other day said that people like myself do not believe in any other narrative. We believe in only our narrative, meaning that we believe in only Black people narrative. Ravi knows that is not true. He knows me enough to know that is not true. But in order to paint me as a Black memory warrior, he has to say so. Now, if I were looking for votes from among Indians, I would have to disassociate myself from myself. And this is the dilemma for the PNC, is that they want to have crossover votes. They want to get crossover votes. And so therefore, in order to get those crossover votes, they figure that, look, we have to throw a little bit off the bus. The problem is that when you throw them a little bit off the bus, that little bit become a big bit over time. Because those are the people you have to go back to when you're in trouble. So it's a dilemma. I'm raising this question not to condemn the PNC, but to say the PNC is in a dilemma. And it's a dilemma that people like myself have had to grapple with. And I've come down on one side. I've said, look, I'm prepared to pay the price. I'm not going to allow people to take advantage of my people. And I shut up. When Indian people are under attack, people like myself come out. In the Buxton thing, when that Buxton thing was going on and they were killing Indian people, Guyana and Daye and myself, we were the only three major Black leaders who came out and said, it's wrong. It's wrong to kill people because of their race. The PPP was using it all over. They were going on shows and using what we said against other Black leaders. For 2, 3, 4 years, the Black leadership didn't talk to us because they felt that we had abandoned Black people because we said it was wrong to kill Indians. The Indians loved us. Now the Indians talk about me. They talk about Guyana and they don't talk about that. They don't talk. So you have to woo Indians. But you cannot do to the point of going against your people. In any case, the Indian leadership, they will never give you credit for it. They will never give you credit for it. They call you.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhinds6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.
Thank you very much and welcome back to Politics 101. I think we had a little hiccup there. But as I was saying, I mean, no matter what Black leaders do, no matter what the PNC does, they're not going to get credit for the Indian leadership for that, right? That is not to say that they should not try. I think when you are an electoral party, you're faced with that dilemma. How far over you go? How far over you go? And I think that's the issue that the PNC has to face. So there we have it. I wanted to address that question tonight because it's something that we have to deal with. Is this the time when Black people are under such attack? They feel so let down. Is this the time to say that you're not a Black party? Perhaps it's not. Perhaps would it not be better not to address that question? Just leave it alone. Just leave it alone. Like I said, I think that if we can get an 85% turnout among Blacks, along with the Amerindian vote, and whatever we can get from among Indians, the coalition can win an election. And note I said coalition, not the PNC. The coalition can win an election. I think so. But we're not going to get 85% turnout among Blacks if we're telling them, if the biggest party in the coalition is saying that they're not a Black party. There has to be another way to speak to Indians than to say you're not a Black party. Something's not right there. There must be a way to speak to Indians than to say you're not a Black party. There must be a way. I think there's a way to say to Indians that, look, our party is supported mainly by African Guyanese. We didn't design it so, but history has thrown that out. But when we get into power, we are going to govern fairly. And when we get into power, govern fairly. It's not whether you're an Indian party or a Black party. It's whether you govern fairly. And govern fairly means, yes, I expect if the PPP get into power, that it will look after its Indian constituency. I get that. But I don't expect you to give 90% of the country's revenue to Indians. Similarly, if you're PNC, when you get into power, I think Indians will understand. If you look after Black people's issues and Black people's problems, what they will not understand is if you give 90% of the resources to Black people. And in fairness to the coalition, they did not do that. Insofar as the coalition did not give the majority of the resources to Black people, they govern fairly. Look, the resources to the Amerindians. Look, the resources to sugar workers. Yet the few Indians left us and went back to the people. Saying you have to decide how you're going to look after your constituency, because when the other parties there, they don't look after your constituency. So when you have power, you have to look after your constituency. But you can't look after your constituency in a way that you openly discriminate against others. That's what the PNC has to work out. The Indians, whether the PPP are in government or not, sections of that Indian constituency get looked after. There's a reason why they call Hoyt Desmond Prasad. Because when he came into power, he signed on to moving the economy towards a private sector economy, and Indians and Portuguese were in the private sector. So they benefited from Hoyt's policy. The IMF tell Hoyt, you have to reduce government spending. That means that you have to reduce spending on public servants. And so therefore, Hoyt had to retrench public servants. Who were public servants? Black people. So the policies Hoyt put in place, in a sense, hurt Black people and helped the Indian merchant class. When the coalition came to power, the Indian merchant class continued to be helped, the BKs and all the others. They make up the majority of the private sector. So if you're going to steer resources in the private sector, you're really steering it to Portuguese and East Indians. And the Indian working class, under the coalition, as I said, with the billions of dollars pumped into sugar, benefited. It was teachers and nurses and public servants who had to fight the coalition government to get something. They got a little, but one cannot accuse the coalition of bending over backwards to help them. It didn't. It bent over backwards to help the others. And so in that sense, you can call it the fair if you're looking at it from the Indian. So Indians, sections of the Indian community have benefited regardless of who governed. Black people have only benefited when a Black government is in office. The PPP never lifted a finger to save bauxite as they are saving sugar or trying to. They never give those bauxite workers $250,000 cash grants as they're giving sugar workers. They never give public servants any big pay raises as they give GAU all the time for sugar workers. Whenever the PPP is in office, Black young men are being killed more. So when the PPP is in office, Black people are in trouble. So the only hope for Black people is when the PPP is not in government, which puts the burden on a PNC-led government to look after Black people. Because if you don't look them after when you lose power, as we have seen in the last year, they're in trouble. So that's a dilemma for the party. We look to when the party is in government to look after we. But the party has to be careful in looking after we, that they don't discriminate against the others. At least that's my Black power. I want you to look after Black people, but I don't want you to discriminate against Indians and Amerindians and so on. I want them to get their fair share. I just want my people to also get their fair share. So I don't support a black government to give away everything to black people. That's not my politics. And it should not be the politics of any black leader. We should insist on giving the fair share to black people, but not discriminate against the others. So therefore, when Brother Roysdale raised that question and people jump on him, I understand why you jump on him, but what he's doing is raising a dilemma. It's a dilemma. He's saying that if Norton wins, Norton is going to tilt the party more to the black side. Right? That's what he's saying. And if you tilt the party more to the black side, then you can't get Indian votes. But if you tilt the party more to the non-black side, you lose black votes. So it's a dilemma. I think it's a dilemma that they have to work out. And that's the point I want to make here tonight. It's a dilemma. There's no right or wrong here, you know? If you're looking for votes, which an electoral party has to, you have to be tactical about it. That's all I'm saying, right? You have to be tactical. That's why people say you stay down the middle. Because if you go too black, you lose the possibility of Indian votes. And if you go too much non-black, you lose some of the black vote. And I think that's a larger question Roysdale is raising. You know, I would not have put it the same way like him, but I think he's raising that question for the party, and the party has to work that out. Has to. I don't think it would help to go too much on the non-black side. I think more than ever the PNC, because of what black people are going through, they have to show some solidarity with blacks. So I don't think the harshness that we've seen on Roysdale is warranted. I think he's raising a legitimate question, and I've gone through all the different permutations to show you that this is a difficult subject. The fact of the matter, unless you can get 85 to 90% turnout among blacks, you need some Indian votes. That's the stark reality. And we have not been able to bring out 85, 90% of black people. So it's about balancing. It's about balancing. It's about balancing. I'm glad the question has been raised so that they're able to debate it, you know?